I'm Erin Cristoval. I'm the assistant curator here and the co-curator of Moten LA 2018. Alongside Ann Elgood, who's over here, my co-curator. Moten LA has been amazing. It's sadly coming to a close. It closes on September 2nd. So if you guys haven't actually seen all the show, you guys should come back. We literally have, like 10 days? So tonight, I'll keep it brief. I will be introducing Suné Woods, Fred Moten, and James Gordon Williams for a piece called You Are Mine, I See Now, I'ma Have to Let You Go. Suné Woods is an artist in Moten LA. Fred is a professor at NYU, an award-winning poet. And James is a professor at Syracuse University and a musicologist. So I will leave it at that, and I will let them take it away.
Come from nothing, from all of Zora and all of Dara. The world is dry land, earth is water. Our regular shit is muddy and irregular. Our shit is the shit in this regard. Regardless, we started walking the floor of the sea to turn it over, plowing the muck, low, country, just like mules of the leafy green, sempiternal and sodden underground, thinking the sudden thickness of our steps, infused with periodic swimming to get the air we can't breathe, saving breath in the muddle of our passage, as Mullen says, or Benfignes say. Fixing, we say like fit. Imagine a little swelling of the space after the consonant. Just a little bit broader time before the X turned to a T, which is implied, then silenced, then acts that same little hollow before the end because the end won't come. Then one last breath and keep writing that shit underneath the floor as our commune. The heavy step of getting down taps lightly in makeshift repetition. This constantly coming back down beat, emboomed in unslit density, recessive unrest in black bottom. The silky lyric viscosity of how we move held down, so that all we can do is take the leg, fling limb in contact, play mouse or ball just like the common amputee. As cool as the other side of the silty pillow. Our shit is irregardless in this regard. That anti-citational burst is the book of life. And all we got to do is come out to show them we ain't got to show you shit. We're posthumous and prenatal. Our shit is posthumorous and preternatural. In the muck, the deep on shore, waiting, bathing. We laugh to keep from laughing like a tremendous submachine. The earthiness of life is irreducibly moist. Digging is a kind of diving. Having turned to the turn, we see that shit. We see the shit. We see our shit and keep our head above water so we can dive. Dig. An amphibian, unarmored, adrift, underderived from a prehistory of fallenness. Black life is wet. Like when Nate tends to certain fluidities of gait, but gracefully mud stuck in the brutal clearing of land. Unforgetting the river's memory, like Morrison says in Mississippi, like Suné says when the escapist sings Rose in summer while singing I never learned to swim, while swimming down the broken street. We black as whales, fish and flesh, and he don't know how we embrace. Submerged is Mary Lou, and whirled is Darwish. What's it feel like to look at blackness, mixing, singing, and drowning, sounding, and dancing, but hesitating forever to be a signal or a judge? This they asked in protest of themselves, surrounded by themselves in bolts of blue. But that honorable fabric don't feel so good. Whiteness is a set of interpersonal relations. The interpersonal is an intrapersonal fantasy. The intrapersonal is an impersonal fantasy. The impersonal fantasy of the interpersonal is your picture. Imagination in the law of solitude. On the other hand, in which this same hand is held, off blue, in extrapersonal folding. The image of hands held in folding is unavailable, but the tangle infuses every image. My Black Death is my debut, my stole, done up in blueprint blue. It sure looks good on you, it just don't feel so good. To disappear in a loose arrangement of flowers. Slave narrative ain't the genre in which one gives an account of slavery in oneself. Slave narrative is the disappearance of oneself and the diffusion of slavery in the giving, which can't be accounted for, of the account. Sounding drowning's loose arrangement.
But not for me twice. Staggered looping. It's cool too, 'cause the density is light. Phonic sparkle. Flesh ropes the body it waits for. When 3 threads out and fans and brushes. Under the duress of emplotment and possession. Immersion, ruptured solitude, no matter what. We
Just
can't
be making
breathe
something
forever.
all the time.
We look for air pockets, an informal market on the corner, the club, a chapel made of bottle trees. Every last breath we want to breathe somebody.
Just be making something all the time so you can use it.
So beautiful and refusing. Illuminating high water everywhere.
Just be making something all the time so you can use it to be making something with somebody all the time.
Graphic and quartering ourselves. traffic in quartering ourselves, and a solid in embrace. Wasn't nobody but some chords and various antistates and jingles. Blackness is arpeggiation and displacement.
Maybe the distinction is between empathy and empathy.
Blackness is swimming.
One emerging from a point of view.
Can't quite let the water go
The
or
other
be.
current and shatter and entwine.
We harp on the water.
But which knows which is which?
The blackness of the whole thing is that our flesh lights up the world, the ringing, the bubbles. The particles appear to fade in suspense. What else might happen to us folds us in, not but amniotic whale. We're whales.
Maybe it all goes back to that same black athenic vehemence and passion. An infeeling of outness sung for the caravan. She from around the way of ain't no way, and ain't no non-violent way to look at it. The camera pans down, moves down, spiraling into the wine and urine-stained hallway. And what the camera moves toward as an eye, a hand that somehow was and is the camera. The hand's gesture at and with, in all this beauty as the camera's motion, it's having fallen, and fallenness is all that beauty.
The particles appear to fade in suspense. What else might happen to us folds us in, not but amniotic whale. We're whales. We hate the world. We love the word whirl, our whirlpool pianism, our practice. Our name is saturation. Blackness is swimming. Can't quite let the water go or be.
Can't hold back no water when it wanna go. Rhythmic placelessness is our gardening, folding, bending, and crumpling. Back to living again with its inborn recursion. It's prolegomena to any future metaphysics, or metaphysics for a preface that can't stop coming. We share the preservation of placelessness under the duress of placement, to be put in place and kept in place, to be conferred a place and to have it, to own it, to try to keep it, to have a body imposed upon one as one's place, one's simultaneous foundation and incarceration in denial of none is monocultural sugar for your golden bowl. Our milpa, all out from all up under and all over all and all of anyone's ownership of solid, subdivided ground, turns transubstantiation co-substantial. Comida, como vida, that's not your body, that's my body. And she almost says, as there they go all falling out together, the dislocation and differentiation of the mass, the celebration of the mess in mass displacement, the unruly animonastic dispersion and cenobitic diffusion, and as such, in all its deformative force, the preservative, placeless place, the gateless, blood-stained gate. Wu says black women say they hear their babies they can't have, be trying to say. The view they walk, vestibular blur, vestibulant mule, the vestibler, be mule bone blue, deacon blue, which the soloist who is not one impersonates as a circular thrill of floating recircular field.
But not for me twice. Staggered looping is cool too, cause the density is light, fawning sparkle. Flesh ropes the body it waits for. When 3 threads out and fans and brushes under the duress of emplotment and possession, immersion ruptures solitude no matter what.
Let our flesh be shared, shard, sheer, sheer. It's hard, damned, this quick, incarnate incompleteness. calls the event of the Negro is the sign of reviled, refused, recombinant generality. The sheer Ellingtonian wrapped around the wooing presence of the absence in the instrument, which is there in the presence of the instrument, which is there in the elegant recess of the arc surrounding deep in the edge of sounding. Some of them asking in a migrant chord's embrace about release. Some possible one, too, that won't take anybody's fixed position. It's some degenerate satin generativity. Ross says individuation and the individual is not just not one. They are more generally split and supernumerary. This constitutes some kind of paired para-individuality, an impaired individuation whose design is pointed toward a self whose business is in the street. Open, processual, but dignified at the gig, with that fly-ass gig band. Side signs intellect in action, sighing a favorite phrase that plays Du Bois, impersonating in an open set of open sets of breathing, handed sheets as something other than itself, which is as it should be, which is how he is. This continual calling us out our name, in love with how we open up somehow, sometimes, rubbing something in and out of the way of things. Copula all out of place, portable as the sound we see in the surround, Ross says, as he always be saying, displacing, celebrating how we a mess.
Under the duress of envelopment and possession, immersion, ruptured solitude, no matter what. Can't quite let the water go or be. We harp on the water.
What if we mess up the relation between multiplicity and division? What if the umbrella underneath which dividual and individual, singular and multiple, exist is in fact the concept and condition of separation, which feels so good when you rub up on it that pulse comes to an end? What if the relation between, which is the between placelessness, timelessness, and inseparability, is no count after all? Like BB's unbearable phrasing on how blue. Can you get to that, sister? Can time travel on this train?
The
Maybe
blackness
vision
of
is the
whole
hidden
thing
scandal.
Is that our flesh lights up the world,
P.I.E. rude way
the
to
ringing the
separate.
bubbles,
P.I.E. rude way to see.
but not for me twice.
As if to separate is to see.
Wasn't nobody but some chords and various antisates and
As if
jingles.
separation is at first an
Our
ordering
name
of
is
the scene
saturation.
that is, more fundamentally,
Graphic and quartering
an
ourselves,
ordering and seeing.
and a solid in embrace.
What if the thinking disorder, like Ra, like Denise's song flute, is to think outside ordered seeing? The sound of that dropped H, resplendent in Hester, regiven by brother. What if this interplay of ordering and seeing is solitary confinement? What if disorder is having a party in the givenness of the party? Ra plays the companionship of sentient flesh, thinking in disorder and experiencing sunlit placelessness till we're all the way out of our minds in another storybook. If the problem is the maintenance of separation, then saving is the blur that movement makes in not arriving.
Particles appear to fade in suspense. What else might happen to us folds us in. Not but amniotic whale. We're whales. We hate the world. We love the word whirl. Our whirlpool pianism, our practice. Our name is saturation.
Does he think that all he says of Cinema's extravagance of the image is somehow compatible with some fullness of the black subject? What if your movement through the image cuts the very idea of the individual as well? His genius shows the tangle, the common roots of the visual individual, but that's what they refuse in Gila Tao. They have Suné too, but they keep giving it away. They're like a burning shepherd when their children hold the boom. When will our children hold the boom again?
We can't breathe forever.
What is the visual?
We look for air pockets.
An anti-sensual seeing and separation and of it.
An informal market on the corner of the club, a chapel made of bottle trees.
Then the visual regulates the senses so that that false assumption is confirmed.
Every last breath we want to breathe somebody, so beautiful in refusing.
Can intoned, haptic looking give looking back in black on black enfolding, refusing the visual and the visual in goodbye?
Illuminating high water everywhere.
Seeing's blind if you can't hear. Blur and blue and of it. A shattering spin inside, a curse or curve, cuvee that animates before the beginning and after hours, eradicating the taint of purity from would have been outside. Feel that? Funk not only moves, it can remove, dig, dive.
We're whales.
Rod thinks the eventual thing is irrevocable passage through embodiment as imposition and theft. The trace of the thing in nothingness, the nothingness given in withdrawal from thingliness, where grace is constant, radically anarchic groove and furrow. Perhaps in this regard, bodies are just remnants of calculation left to the wind of their own fade, like a dam, a diked up dictic rabbit in Beverly Farms, hoping to be cooked by Beverly Corbett, but subject to the subject's description of subjective experience, which is lonely at the base of a tree it never noticed, being a bee rabbit and silent at the next cipher, thereby constraining us to picture and enumerate the subject of experience at the intersection of the individual and the individual. Is it a rabbit or a duck? Door open or closed? Nah, just this and that cloud not in between us. Us, all unauthentically what? This, that beauty.
The particles appear to fade in suspense. What else might happen to us folds in, not but amniotic wall. We're whales. water go or be. We harp on the water. The blackness of the whole thing is that our flesh lights up the world, the ringing, the bubbles. The particles appear to fade in suspense. What else might happen to us folds us in, not but amniotic wall. but not for me twice. Staggering, looping, it's cool too, 'cause the density is light, phonic sparkle. Flesh ropes the body it waits for. When 3 threads out in fans and brushes, under the duress of emplotment and possession, immersion ruptures solitude no matter what. We can't breathe forever. We look for air pockets, an informal market on the corner, the club, a chapel made of bottle trees. Every last breath we want to breathe somebody, so beautiful in refusing, illuminating high water everywhere, graphic in quartering ourselves, and a solid in embrace. Wasn't nobody but some chords in various antistates and jingles. Blackness is arpeggiation and displacement. Blackness is swimming. Can't quite let the water go or be. We harp on the water. The blackness of the whole thing is that our flesh lights up the world. The ringing, the bubbles. The particles appear to fade in suspense. What else might happen to us folds us in. Not but amniotic whale. We're whales. We hate the world. We love the word whirl. Our whirlpool pianism, our practice, our name is saturation.
We're getting ready to have a Q&A. Yeah, if anybody wants to.
Yeah, maybe. Where should I put the stands? Okay. Can you help me pick these up? Can you help?
Testing, testing.
This is the Q&A portion of the evening. If you have a question, please raise your hand.
I think there's supposed to be somebody giving you a mic.
We're coming with the mics.
Thank you. I was just curious about the scoring process in this, like how much of this was improvisational, how much was it rehearsal? I mean, thinking of the three elements that were happening in the space, the language, the visual, and the sonic, how you guys, because I know you guys have done a presentation like this before, so what's the conversations leading up to this and how are you thinking about scoring?
Well, thank you for your question. As you said, there are three different texts, but we don't think of them as really different. We think of them as sort of interlaced. And that's the beautiful challenge of a project like this, to work with different texts and to experiment. To answer your first question, I'm totally improvising. Okay. Every iteration of this is brand new, and there's no recycled material. So it's a total improvisation. And I am, of course, in reacting to Fred's text and Suné's videos. And it's a very interesting challenge to do that, to make it all work, and somehow it just works. Actually, as I told them before today, I said, well, it's not so important that it works or not. It's the attempt, the effort, the journey, doing a project like this every single time. So, in terms of the conversations that we have leading up to this, we do talk, but in some ways talking gets in the way. You can't really plan something like this out too much. We know what our specialties are, what our mediums are, and we bring them together in a sort of a spontaneous fluidity.
Our first iteration of this was in Syracuse, and so we had a long conversations, I guess, like through Skype and email, because we were in 3 different cities, because you had already moved, I believe. I agree that like sometimes the talking does get in the way, But we did kind of like, Fred and I worked together on a previous piece, Falling to Get Here, and we had long conversations about intimacy, and that was kind of like leading into the next phase of what we were doing, all 3 of us were doing together. And it was just an opportunity in Syracuse through a light work that the 3 of us came together. And it, previously it was a single channel video, and this kind of was an iteration where we could all 3 kind of work more instinctually.
Yeah, we hopefully, we rehearsed a couple times here, and then, the performance tonight was actually very different from either of the previous rehearsals. And downstairs when we were talking before, I think I was already looking forward to the next time we get to practice before the performance. So I'm hoping that, we just have to make a way to be able to keep doing it. And eventually, I'm hoping that I would become as comfortable really improvising as James and Suné are. I'm still pretty sort of text bound and not capable of flowing in that same way. But I'm gonna keep working on it though.
Yeah, I certainly didn't mean to. No, there was a lot of preparation actually. Now that I think about it, we did have extensive conversations. It's coming back to me now. There was a lot of groundwork and a lot of theorizing and thinking through the different texts. So, jet lag, guys. But yeah, and it's an ongoing process. So.
Over here.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Like, the performance just made me very happy. So what I'm interested in is, in regards to the performance, was like the notion of the generation of context. And what I mean is, like the other day I went to see Suné's exhibit. And I was a little frustrated because I was like, it wasn't enough. It wasn't close enough. Like, I could feel other artworks. Like, it was very, I don't know how to explain it beyond that, but I just wanted there to be like a space solely dedicated like to the work. That's the first thing I felt when I saw it, was like, it needs to be more poignantly portrayed. And like, I watch a lot of Professor Moten's like lectures on YouTube, and it's always like you in front of like a white wall, and it's like, there's a sense of like isolation just structurally. And so it was really cool to see like blackness contextualized by more blackness. Like, that was the first kind of iteration that I've really witnessed of that. And I really wanted to connect that to like Moten's notion of like consent not to be a single being, and like connecting that to the idea of context. And I really liked Suné's notion of like immersion ruptures solitude no matter what. Like, I really liked that, specifically in relation to context and consent not to be a single being, like via what you call the improvisation of social organization. So I just want to like, I don't know how to formulate that into a question, but I want y'all to like elaborate more upon that and like how that culminated in the production of your performance.
Well, first of all, I mean, I really think part of the reason why I'm so, just in deep admiration of Suné's work is because, I mean, I was thinking of this the last kind of 10 minutes or so when I was just sitting there watching, and I thought to myself, what I guess I would want to say, this is just my opinion, is that at a certain point, so imagine that if we thought about the transatlantic slave trade in the proper way, in my opinion, the proper way, one of the ways that we would have to understand it, and I think maybe the most fundamental way that we would have to understand it, is that it initiates an ecological disaster, right? It's so much deeper than any framework within which we valorize, let's say, individual achievement as the measure, let's say, of our freedom or something like that. So that if there's a liberatory force to black social life, it will not just be that we have become presidents or great artists or professors. The proof will be in whether or not the capacity of the earth to sustain human life will be maintained. So when I see those images of water, when I see, you know, black flesh, particularly women, in the water that way, for me, it just foregrounds that ecological problem. So what do you say about, what's the ecological problem? If you wanted to put it in a sentence, it would be, it's the problem of like how stuff goes together, which is to say, it assumes the absolute irreducible necessity of stuff going together. For me, that's what blackness is. It's just like a kind of ethical way, an ethical comportment toward the fact that stuff has to go together, as opposed to other possible ways of existing in the world, which is pretty much predicated on separating things, codifying things, categorizing things in the interest of elimination of most of those things, or the accumulation of other of those things. So when we're trying to work, you know, we're trying to act out that problem, right? Trying to figure out how to go together, you know? How are we gonna be in this room together? How are we gonna, it's a church problem, you know? I mean, it's a, so forgive, I mean, I'm basically just, I'm acting like that's what you and I would mean when we said context, right? It's how stuff goes together, so.
I think how that plays out in the performance tonight, of the performances, is that there is no, we go in the other direction of quanticizing time. And so what we do is, our intertextuality is a bricolage, okay, of different texts, okay, sort of a staggering. And that is how it's represented in the break, if you will. The constant breaks and the ruptures and the regeneration, the recycling of ideas that is anti any sort of hierarchical thinking, okay? There's absolutely no hierarchy sort of in the text here. It's just an I hate to use that word, intersectionality, but it works, okay? Of all these different texts going together in a type of harmony, the type of searching. So I think that's how it's at least represented in what I'm doing in response to your art. Okay.
Yeah, I think that you know, like in a lot of the images that we use tonight came from the project upstairs, Aragonite Stars, and a lot of that was thinking through like how bodies of water could be healing too. You know, like what Fred talks about, the kind of like the inception of slavery and capitalism and ecological issues. I'm trying to think through like how we can heal from those things. So a lot of those images come from that place, and Aragonite Star is like an earth healer.
Any more questions? Go over there.
Yeah, that was amazing, guys. I wanted to thank you for that. I actually came in kind of later, or halfway through, I think. But I guess I wanted to talk about kind of, or to you, Suné, and it's a beautiful name. It's my sister's name. And so I haven't really, it's like unique or whatnot. But I just wanted to kind of bring up the idea of boredom, and you brought up capitalism, and kind of we've been speaking from an ecological point of view and connection to kind of the transatlantic slave trade and whatnot, and kind of what that means for, black people today, and then kind of regaining what was taken away from us. And so I love the tie of water and kind of being underwater that whole time, and just the black fleshlight that you had mentioned, being present in water, because it's so often disconnected. And I guess I wanted to bring up an idea of, going back to boredom, and how I was kind of bored by your work at the end. And I think I was turned off by it at the end. And I guess I just wanted to pose a question of, is that some way of, and I think at first I was really drawn to the images and the pic, because it's like National Geographic. I'm like, shit, this is cool. This is, I'm really vibing with this, and I want to see like what's going to come up, the dolphins on the beach and whatnot. But I kind of got over it, honestly, and then I'm just like listening to the music, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then, basically hearing the speaking throughout and whatnot. But I just wanted to ask if that was purposeful, or if it was if it had any tie to kind of your understanding of capitalism and kind of commodity fetishism, and kind of how the late stage of capitalism that we're in, and how it has just kind of lost interest over time. And yeah, that's it.
Well, I'm certainly interested in like the mundane, and like how we move through kind of everyday life, and the purpose wasn't necessarily to bore you necessarily. But that's interesting too. But I'm interested in kind of like the everyday, like how we just move through, swim through everyday life. And so it a lot of it had, like a lot of the images that I was kind of sourcing were kind of our relationship to, different kinds of sea life and, bodies of water. And, Fred talks quite a lot about like us as whales, and, like these, how he thinks black folks are whales, I'll let Fred talk about that. But yeah, do you want to go into the whales?
I think whales are cool, but generally don't bother nobody. They make good music. They're pleasantly plump.
But I would also add that it was kind of like anti-National Geographic. I mean, a lot of the sources were taken from YouTube, people who are, taking their own videos, so it wasn't like the aesthetic of National Geographic. The intention was not the aesthetic of National Geographic, but sourcing from people who actually kind of are, in the way that I was making the work upstairs, is, being in bodies of water and experiencing the water and capturing what was experienced.
I think we do be trying to bore some people. It's a defense mechanism. We were given strict orders not to talk to anybody unless they had a mic, because they want you to be
I'll
on
bring
tape.
the mic. It's okay. I got you.
I wanted it to be organic. Hi, how y'all doing? I love the topic of boredom. I'm here for water. I think mostly, I guess I would like to bring like mental health into the conversation, and one's relation. I feel like for me a big hurdle in like having a healthy mental health relationship was embracing the mundane and moving away from this the reality of how maybe capitalism has forced me to be in a constant state of consumption of myself ultimately, like is where I landed when I arrived to a very heavy mental place of depression. I was consuming myself, so I had to really redefine and reframe what it meant to engage my everyday. And what I love about this and the conversations that are arriving around like sitting with the same images, or I'd like to definitely state that for me there was a communion and opportunity to reframe and reprocess these things as they were coming up because of the improvisation that was happening. But I forget what the process is, but when plants get like wilted and you like fill the pot with water, and then next time, maybe like 3-4 hours, you come back and you look at it and it's full again. Me and Taisha had this conversation, but like that you won't see that plant become full again unless you sit and stare with it for those 3 hours. And I like to imagine that this piece was very coded to be for people that are willing to sit and not imagine this is something I need to consume and it's here for me to just like take, but rather it's something that I'm supposed to be in communion with. So I appreciated that.
Hello?
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
never mind. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. It was somewhat related to that, but I'm just really curious if you guys could just comment on just specifically the issue or the strategy of repetition and maybe connected to a duration.
Well, when I was growing up, we used to go to my mom's best friend's house for dinner every Sunday. And I think I probably had Sunday dinner at their house from the time I was 13 or 14 until my mom's friend passed away. I don't know, it must have been a couple, seems like 1,000 times. And the dinner was always very sort of centered around the telling of stories, but it was a limited repertoire of stories. It was probably maybe 10 stories. And I guess what I would want to say is not only, it's not just I was never bored. I think maybe that was where I learned how to not be bored. I've never been bored again because I started being able to pay attention to texture and to differences within the context of the repetition. Now, I would say it does produce a certain kind of interesting relation to time, but not, the first instance in my mind wouldn't necessarily be duration. It would be more like a complex set of intertwined maybe segments of time or partial timelines that I wouldn't ordinarily have access to. So I remember one particular story always involved the image of my mom's great aunt, Aunt Bet, walking down the street in Kingsland, Arkansas, where my mom lived. And I heard that story about her so many times that even though she died 30 years before I was born, I can see her walking down that street. Which, by the way, was the same street you were on, AJ, when we did that filming. It was that street. So I don't know if it's maybe boredom has to do with duration, insofar as duration implies a univocal timeline that can be infinitely extended to the point of, boredom, I suppose. But what was at stake in those Sunday dinners was I kept having access to times that weren't necessarily mine, you see? So it was a very different, I think more complicated, more multi-various, kind of temporality that experience opened up. So it just makes it so that you can learn how to pay attention. And insofar as you learn how to pay attention, you actually you get to go places and be at moments that ordinarily you wouldn't get a chance to be in. So the repetition, for me at least, is important and interesting precisely because of the way in which it produces difference.
Yeah, I guess that's what I would add too is like what could be learned from repetition and what are the nuances that happen when something is repeated, and is it really repeated, or is there like a slight shift, and what do you learn from that?
Come over here now.
Hey, thank you, Suné. It's really a few things going off. One is the repetition and the shift and how that was embodied by all of you tonight, and the cycling. And then the other is watching the piece upstairs and watching it again tonight with the three of you. Just the way that it can, if you can sit and just let it enter you. And every time I see these images, like the water comes out. So thank you, and thank you for the letting us feel your working together, and that exploration. And I guess I don't really have a question, but the one thing that I was thinking was when you talked about the ecological disaster, Fred, and the relation of black bodies to the Atlantic, and how that trade, that slave trade, and just the presence of those bodies in water. So I was just thinking about that as you were speaking tonight.
I'd like to provide maybe a slightly different type of context. Hopefully people will this will resonate maybe with some people may not be able to receive it. A lot of people have used the word repetition and variations on that word. So first, that context. If you think about what it is to be a Black person, it has to do with cycles. It is circular. We're circular people. Not to make it like a contest, but white culture is linear. And so the fact that if Black people here are seeing it as circular, that means that you've kind of been indoctrinated and trained and kind of forgotten how what we do is constantly return and constantly return. And even in the titling of I'ma Have to Let You Go, it's kind of a thread through our history that we have to let everything go, mostly because it's stolen from us, so then we must reinvent, and that's just, I guess, become our specialty, but it is what we do. So I wanted to kind of get away from people constantly saying repetition, and also healing was mentioned, and I wanted to touch on that and how that ties in. The way that we heal is to come back to something. It's even how we get the word or the term Sankofa, how we return. That is our birthright. It's in our DNA. It's who we are. So I just want, so maybe again, this isn't a question, sorry, but it's a little bit of a reminder. Don't let another person's context take away from how you should intrinsically receive this piece, because if you kind of get into what I'm saying and see it through that context, it's just a coming home. And there's no repetition because you're always at source and always coming back to source.
Thank you for that. There's a theorist named Michelle Wright who talks about the physics of blackness. And she says that so much of our knowledge in the West has been organized by Newtonian time, which is linearity. And this concept of linearity has organized all knowledge in the West. And so if we think linearly, we're actually thinking about repetition in that way, instead of interchanging circles or cycles. And she also talks about the middle passage epistemology and how that has to be challenged, because that has also been organized, by linear time, this notion of Newtonian time. So we have to get away from that and investigate other ways of being Black in the world. And I think we represented that tonight, sort of our intersecting space-times. Regardless of the medium that we were using, our space-times were intersecting. And it's getting into a different space that's outside of this hegemonic notion of linearity. And I think this is what you were talking about, Fred, earlier, where you're talking about the codification of culture. And so many other, if you think about the codification of Black music, and you have that quantized beat that everybody expects, boom, 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 and it's sort of the way that it regulates our bodies. Well, what we're doing tonight is against that codification and linearized regulation. I don't know if that makes sense. Now, when I think about repetition, it is not playing the same thing necessarily. And really, there's sort of an impossibility to that. I think of it as a regeneration. Anybody who listens to good funk music understand that there's a regeneration coming from that beat. It's not the same thing. If it was the same thing, it wouldn't really uplift you. You wouldn't get to higher gradations of consciousness through the music. So I'll stop there. Riff on that.
We'll go over here.
Hi, thank you so much for your work tonight. I just had a question about, in preparing for this, a little window into how you all spoke or discussed bodies, specifically your own bodies in this space. I was just wondering about the choice of staging and also kind of the relationship between learned behavior or like practiced behavior that's a part of how we all move, and then the images that we saw in the video that sometimes I think pushed against that or tried to have us relate certain things to flesh in the body that we might not always immediately understand. So I don't know, just the relationship between your bodies and your own physicality and what we saw in the video, and also, of course, all of us also sitting here in the same room.
That's yours.
Our physicality in this space. Yeah.
I have a bad back and a bad hip, basically from sitting down for many years, you know, in front of a computer or at a desk or something like that. And I definitely, you know, feel the effects of that now. Also, you know, I guess if my kids, you know, fell overboard, I think I could probably swim well enough, you know, in a panic to get them, but I'm not a swimmer. So I do get a feeling of I admire the swimmers in the film, both human and non-human. And there is a sense of, I don't want to say freedom, but I don't know what the word would be, that they have an alternative set of capacities with regard to movement that I would like to have, you know? So I definitely think about that. At the same time, particularly with regard to the human swimmers, they can't stay underwater forever. So it's interesting to consider that interplay between, let's say, the relative, for lack of a better word, freedom of movement that one can have underwater and the duress of not being able to breathe. And it turns out that in a weird way, that condition that's very specific to being under the water is maybe, you know, for many people, particularly black folks, also a condition that accrues to not being under the water. You know, that condition in which you can both, well, here I am, I'm above ground, I'm above the water, but I still can't breathe. Or here I am, you know, in the water, and I have a certain kind of freedom of movement, but I still can't move, or at least move freely, or that sense of people, you know, the turning, you know, that sense of being, you know, entangled like that. So, I mean, I think there's those ways where I'm noticing that kind of other physicality that maybe I don't really have access to now, maybe never really did. But I don't necessarily want to think about it in terms of bodies, I guess, is what I would say. in the end. 'Cause when it comes to bodies, I don't know. I wish I could ever, if I ever get a chance to have a conversation with Hortense Spillers about this, I would probably end up being I suspect I'm more fundamentalist about this than she is. But she convinced me pretty much that it doesn't make sense anymore to talk about black bodies. So I just don't. And also, the older I get, the more committed I am to that. Because for the most part, my body is shot, you know? So I'm just like, I'm ready to, you know, get it replaced, you know, for the most part. So, yeah, I don't know what else.
Yeah, you could be like Doro and Wild Seed and just like take on another body. Or yeah, that's true. I think when I initially started working in water was a few years ago, and I was thinking of the idea of escape, and also with this work, you know, thinking through ideas of the underworld, and you know, a lot of cultures believe that ancestors reside in the water, and so I was interested in you know, it as an environment, you know, as a kind of like a whole system or cosmological system in itself, and that you know, these entities like occupy these spaces as a way to kind of think through and move through what may not be possible in this realm.
Thanks. Hi, Suné. I actually want to use what we've been saying to think about the visual aspect of the work for a minute. The first is the idea of repetition and redundancy. And redundancy is actually the figure of the wave, etymologically speaking, meaning the wave coming and coming and coming. So in a way, I think there's an aspect of the wave becoming the figure, the texture of what we're talking about, you know, whether it be difference in repetition or the source. So that's one thing that I think is interesting to think about on a visual level. And the second is, I was very taken by what Fred just said about how this feeling of freedom is impinged upon by the physical need to breathe, right? So it's both the sort of freedom and the limit of freedom simultaneously in my motion. And that, I think, visually played itself out for me in the bilateral repetition of the two screens through belatedness, meaning you see one thing and then you see the other, and you see the same thing belatedly repeated. So what one sees or what one felt simultaneously, because a lot of the text relates to the historical violence of whether the transatlantic slave trade or, you know, just the ecological, whatever it might be. So one sees two things for me. One is the comfort in that this body being there, and yes, it's still there. That it could possibly be different, it could possibly escape, but it actually cannot, you know, because its visuality, its fact of being, is tied to a certain mechanism, a certain template. So I just want to in a way, I feel like I really appreciate everything that's been said, but I just want to think a little bit about the visual aspects.
We'll take one or two more questions. And
We'll do over here.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you first, and I'm gonna like take it down a notch a little because like, I feel like I heard a lot about like healing, and someone up there mentioned like capitalism and consumption, and I was really interested by this concept of like boredom because I feel like the whole time I was watching, I was overcome by this sense of like anxiety because I was so intent on consuming and understanding and like finding catharsis in like understanding. And so like by the end, I was okay with not understanding possibly. And I suppose I'm asking, if I may, was there an overarching emotional experience for any of you during the like creation process, or was the reflection of images kind of like a reflection of the different emotional experiences one can have?
I feel like that question is asking like, how are you supposed to feel? And I think that like how you feel is how you feel, you know, throughout the piece. So like what you experience is what you experience, you know, like what you come with it through, like what you knowledges you have already and what you kind of bring to this room, and how your body kind of physiologically experiences like all of what we brought to the space is what you should get, you know, like, and I think everybody probably got something different.
Have you ever sung along with a song when you knew you didn't know the words? I don't know. I feel like it's really, there's so much stuff that I don't understand, you know, but it's still interesting to me, and then some of it, a lot of it is still really beautiful, and a lot of times stuff I do understand, I want to mess it up so I don't understand it anymore, and then it gets renewed in that way, and I feel like I don't understand love, I don't understand friendship. I'm blessed with these things, you know, but I don't get it, you know, but I'm living in it, living through it, you know, and so this is just another way of saying, or a repetition of something I said before, just fascinated by how stuff goes together, and just committed to stuff going together, and committed to resisting any impulse to make stuff not go together. So sometimes you write something down and write words to get, you know, well, we were talking about this before. I mean, Cecil Taylor, at one point in his film, he's asked to describe his composition process, and he said, I play one note, and then I try to find another note that sounds good next to it. And that's, I really don't, I think that is fundamental to art and to thought long before the, you know, the impulse to represent. It's just a practice of friendship, and you can be sitting in a room with somebody doing something completely different from them, but you're still there together with them, and that's all. I mean, we just, and you know, like I said, I'm really looking forward to the next time we get a chance to do it. And looking forward to the next time we get a chance to practice, trying to figure out a way where we can be together for a week or two and just really figure out what we're doing. And then to have a performance in which we realize that whatever we thought we had figured out about what we're doing was wrong, and then we keep going. So, you know, and ready to fight anybody who wants to stop us from doing that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.